So I happened to find the Sefer on my Otzar HaChachma. It was got to be around 20 years ago. And its author is anonymous. It was written by a Kolel person in Tufshin Sadi Tes. So that's less than 20 years ago. We're in Tufshin Pei Gimel. This is written about 14 years ago. It's published around 14 years ago, so it's relatively contemporary. It has a lot of haskamas from Rav Elyashiv and other great Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. And it's divided into three parts. Chelik Aleph, Kitzer Hilchot, Halachot, Miposkei Hadorot ad Poskei Zmanenu. Sort of an abbreviated set of halachos from the poskim of all generations until our time. Chelik Bet, Shuvas Gedoylei HaPoskim Imiyunim B'Mishnasam. The second part are specific responsa about cases, real life cases that came before different poskim throughout different periods of Jewish history. And Chelik Gimel, Shuvos L'She'elos Actualios, responsa to real life questions that are for the contemporary man. Okay, so I think it's you do find it with a small amount of svarim. It's considered a sign of humility, of great humility, of a person who doesn't want to expose himself to the public, and maybe he feels that the Sefer will be better received if people don't know who it is. I don't know what this particular person's motivations were. Maybe it was just real humility. Okay. Actually, Rav Elyashiv's Haskam, I didn't make a copy of it. He wrote the name of the fellow, and the guy whited it out when he reprinted the thing. Yeah. So this is the cover page, and so let me just move now to the table of contents. And I think that the table of contents is quite educational. I really do find the table of contents to be sometimes one of the most important parts of the book. But before we do that, let's take a look at the author's Hakdama. It's just a one-page Hakdama. He says, Odeh Hashem al chasto hagadol. I give thanks to God for his great kindness, Shesam chalki miyoshvei beis hamedrash, that has allowed me to be able to sit and learn in the beis medrash, lihistofeif b'chatzeros beis Hashem, to be able to habitate the courtyards of the house of God. V'zikeni lahotzi la'oretz hasefer Hilchos tzedakah, asher kuli tikva sheyeh l'to'elet rabba l'chol mi she'osek b'Hilchos tzedakah. I hope that this will be of universal benefit to anyone who is engaged in the laws of tzedakah. Hakuntrus hazeh kolel shlosha chalakim. So sort of this folio, doesn't even call it a book, includes three parts. Achelek harishon hu kitzer hilchos tzedakah aruch lefi seder shel hashulchan aruch. The first part is basically like a kitzer shulchan aruch on hilchos tzedakah, going according to the order of the simanim as they appear in Yoredeya, in the laws of tzedakah. Shabo sikamti be'ezras Hashem b'loshon kala et ikarei ha'halachot hanuchutzot l'maisa l'lo tosfos chidush mishali. I have, in essence, sort of abridged in a simple language the basic halachos that are necessary for halacha l'maisa, without adding any addenda or any novel additions. Kemo kein sikamti b'chelik hazeh es piskei gedolei poskei zmanenu, kedei sheyiyu l'neged einav shel kol ben Torah. He says, I have also, in this first portion, given you the bottom line psak halacha of the poskim of our time, so that they should be in front of any ben Torah harotze ladas ma posku hagdolim, If you want to know what the Gedolei Yisrael have paskin, asher biladeim kimat efshar lagia b'ilchos tzedakah lahalacha berura. It says because without a bottom line psak, it's almost impossible to come to any conclusion in Hilchos tzedakah. Now, I do want to just say one caveat over here. Hilchos tzedakah, I believe, deliberately has a variety of positions in the Shulchan Aruch. In other words, we're going to see that there are some poskim who require an absolute 10%. There are going to be other poskim who do not require an absolute 10%. There are going to be some poskim who require 10% off of your gross earnings, and others who require 10% off of your net earnings. And the definition of net is going to vary also. So you're going to see a variety of opinions. That's what I meant by positions, a variety of opinions as to what the, how much you're supposed to give. Now, in my opinion, the reason why there is a variety of opinions as to how much you're supposed to give is because depending upon one's economic bracket, depending upon one's situation within the Jewish community, depending upon which community a person lives, depending upon one's family situation, who one is married to, how many children one has. There are so many unique features and factors in every single person's calculus as to how much tzedakah to give. And the reason why you have different opinions as far as these shitas and hilchos tzedakah is because there is supposed to be some latitude and leeway. As we're going to see, most of these halachos having to do with giving 10% of your money is rabbinic law. It's not biblical law. And so when he says we're going to see the bottom line of the poskim of our time, let's also be aware that there may be a variety of difference among those poskim. I'm assuming he's going to be culling from the Haredi poskim that are within his orbit, right? And not necessarily, let's say, American poskim or poskim in the Dati Leumi community, but the poskim in his orbit. So let's just keep that in mind as well. Ki harbe pratim ein lahem makor b'gemara v'rishonim o b'nosei klei hashulchan aruch. He says there are many details of Hilchos Tzedakah that are not to be found in the Gemara or in the Rishonim or even in the commentaries to the Shulchan Aruch. V'heim tluyim b'svaraso uv'shikol daito shel haposek. And they are sometimes often left up to the discretion of the person offering the psak halacha. Tikvasi shetiya mizeh to'eles l'mi sherotze l'kayim mitzvos tzedakah u'maiser ksafim behidur u'v'diktuk. My hope is that this work will benefit anyone who wants to fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah and tithing one's income not only in the most accurate of ways, but also to beautify the mitzvah, meaning that we're going to see that, yes, can you fall back on more lenient opinions? Yes, but we're going to offer you the different positions that are out there, and we'll see how he's going to structure this. Bifrat lefi hamatzav hasorer kayom be'eretz Yisrael etzel tzibur gadol sherubo nechshav ani al pi ha'halacha. And this is particularly so when we are dealing with a large population of Jews in Eretz Yisrael who may fall under the category of ani. In other words, you see there's a lot of poverty in Eretz Yisrael. Thank God it's starting to change, not just among the entrepreneurial components of Israeli society, but also in the Haredi world. And yet there are still probably hundreds of thousands of very, very frum Jews in Eretz Yisrael today who live at the poverty line or below the poverty line, because they wish to stay involved in Torah study, and for a number of socioeconomic reasons, which we're not going to go into now. And therefore, it's really not clear without some level of guidance how whether a person is obligated, how much he's obligated to give, to whom is he obligated to give, and how much to give to each individual. So that's the first part. Second part of this work is a collection of responsa from poskim of our generation. And it's sort of a supplement to the first part, where we give you the bottom line psak of our poskim, but now you'll get to see in the second part the source material for it. And you'll also be able to find more in-depth analysis and questions and the logic behind the psak. And hachelak hashlishi hu avodati ha'ishit al shelot aktualiyot hamitzuyot. And the third section is my own contribution, he says, where I'm going to show you certain real-life questions that have come up that I'm aware of, and what I would like to offer as the halacha l'maisa based on my own conclusions. Yadua she'ein lilmod halacha l'maisa melikutim kibli ha'ayun b'mekarot efshar litot lihikashel ba'halacha. It is known that it is not advisable for a person to try to derive halacha l'maisa from one of these condensed versions, right? The executive summary version of a lot of these halachos. In other words, if you really want to be bored down into the halacha l'maisa issues, you should really go to the source. You should study the Gemara, and then the Rishonim, and then the Tur, and then the Shulchan Aruch, and then the commentaries to the Shulchan Aruch, until you get down to the halacha l'maisa. That's the proper way to do it when you have unlimited time and you're in Kolel and you want to be able to do this. Lachein mazhir, and this is a typo, Lachein mazhir aniyat hakorei shelo yilmad misifriyat halacha l'maisa b'li livdok b'mekarot v'li lishol rav. And therefore, I offer the following caution, that you should not study my work unless you carefully check the sources and consult with your rabbi. Esat tefillah, and my conclusion is, my prayer is Yehi Ratzon Milifnei Adon Hakol, may it be the will of the Master of all, Shehadvarim Yisbararu v'Yislabnu Eitev, that all of the things that I present are well clarified. Umili Ma'al Yasa De'isbu Yiskablun B'vei Midrasha, and any good things that are contained in this work should be accepted in the Beis Medrash. V'Yisayu B'Psika Sahalacha V'Kiyum Mitzvah Tzedakah B'Hidura, and they should be of help in being able to properly paskin halacha and fulfill the mitzvah of tzedakah in its most beneficial or most lofty way. So let's take a look at the maftechot, the table of contents. Okay. Siman Aleph is Godel Schar Hatzdaka. Siman, the great reward for tzedakah. Siman Beis, and this is, he's really structuring it around the Shulchan Aruch. Siman Beis is Michayev B'Tzedakah Uv'Maiser, who was obligated to give tzedakah and to tithe. Siman Gimel Mimi Roi Lekabla, from whom it is appropriate to accept tzedakah. In other words, I guess maybe we'll deal with, can you accept tzedakah from people? Siman Dalid Kama Chayav Latet, how much you have to give. Siman Hey Nikoi Hotzos Umasim Meharevachim, right? How do you deduct your expenses and your taxes? In other words, when calculating your net profits from which you should tithe, how do you calculate that? Siman Vav, Me'ezer Revach Yesh La'aser, from which profits you should tithe. Siman Zayin, I'm not sure what the difference between Hey and Vav is, we'll have to see. Siman Zayin, Tashlum Hotzoas Banav Mikasbe Meiser. When can you use your Meiser money, your tzedakah money that you've tithed for your own children's tuition? Okay, which is in itself an important halachic issue. I'm paying, a father may be paying 50,000 plus for his children's education. My son just told me he's going to be paying $70,000 US this year for his kids' education. He's only got 3 kids, right? This is in LA, where they don't have any subsidies, which is why a lot of people are moving to Florida now. Florida just passed a law they can get $8,000 a child. And in Ohio, they have subsidies now also. But tuition costs have skyrocketed, as we all know, not for any bad reason. In other words, human resources in the schools it's just a reality. You got to pay teachers, and teachers deserve to have a salary, right? So when can I deduct my children's, or how much of my children's tuition? Let's say half the day they're going to study Torah, and I'm supporting children who are studying Torah. And is it my obligation to do so? Or can I say, well, past a certain age, I'm not obligated to support my children's Torah study. They know Aleph Beis already, so anything I add on to that, I can take out of my tzedakah money. Okay, well. I don't know if that's so true anymore. I don't know if you can make that calculus, Mordechai. I mean, I hear that point. I've heard the argument. But if you speak to school administrators, they will tell you our tuition is what it costs to educate your child, and we do independent fundraising to cover our scholarships. Okay. So you can verify that, Marsh.
Towards them to help another kid. That covers that time. That's the cost.
Yeah. Okay, Siman Ches. Keitzad yishtamesh b'tzedakah v'meiser. Now, what is the responsibility of the recipient as far as using the tzedakah money? Siman Tes, Keitzad yitain tzedakah, how you should give tzedakah. And I guess we'll learn about the different ways of, should you ask for a plaque? Should you, get a receipt? Should you give it quietly? Should you give it publicly, right? Simid Yud, Kamaroi Lases L'chalecha Ve'echad. What if you have limited resources and you have multiple recipients? How do you apportion that out? Right. Or in my case, do you give one person $100 or 100 people $1 apiece? Okay. Siman Yud Aleph, Seder Adifus B'Tzedakah, the hierarchy of who gets priority in tzedakah. Okay, Siman Yud Beis, Mihu Haroi Litol Tzedakah, who is worthy of receiving tzedakah. In other words, who qualifies to, like, what do you need to do to qualify to accept tzedakah legitimately according to halacha? Okay, Siman Yud Gimel, Ani sheyesh lo chovos. What if an ani comes to you and says, I need to pay off debt? Does that have a higher priority? And this happens all the time. You have people from Eretz Yisrael saying, I have all of these medical expenses that I have to pay off. There was a guy that was coming for a number of years saying that I got to pay off the mafia because a guy in our community, I mean that very seriously. In other words, he had gotten involved with a loan shark in order to be able to do whatever he needed to do, whether it was medical or weddings or whatever it was. Perhaps the guy was a bit naive. He seems to be a little bit mentally imbalanced when I last saw him. And essentially, he carried legitimate letters from Choshen Rabbanim in Eretz Yisrael, basically saying that the Israeli mafia is after this guy, or the Russian mob, whoever it is in Israel, and we need to help him because it could be Hatzalas Nefashos. Okay, I don't think that's what this chapter is about, but anyway. Siman Yodalid, Shelo lekabel tzedakah migoy umimumar, that you should not accept tzedakah from a Gentile or from a person who's an apostate. Okay, which in itself is quite interesting. Remember, we learned a lot for a very long time in Imrei Yaakov that very few people in the world today qualify as a mumar, even if they're Machal Shabbos. Okay, Siman Tesvav laharchik mekabbalah, so that a person should make every effort to avoid accepting tzedakah. Siman Tes Zayin be'inyan shutvas Yisachar Zvulun. How does the Yisachar Zvulun relationship work? Are you familiar with that term, Yisachar Zvulun? Just to clarify, Yisachar and Zvulun were two sons of Yaakov Avinu, and according to the Gemara, Yisachar dedicated his life to Torah study, and Zvulun was a businessman, and they made a partnership where Zvulun would work for the two of them, and Zvulun would support his own family and Yisachar's family, and in exchange, Yisachar would give Zvulun his spiritual reward for dedicating his life to Torah study. And so there's that concept in Judaism that if you support my spiritual efforts, you get a portion of the spiritual reward, even though you haven't spent. It's like a split, yeah. Or it doesn't necessarily have to be a split. What if I only give you 30% of my tzedakah money? Then maybe I only get 30% of your, I don't know. I don't know if it's always a split exactly. In the case of Yisachar and Zvulun, it was, right? And so there is something to be said for the Yisachar Zvulun relationship. Anytime you support a kollel, right, you're engaging in the Yisachar Zvulun relationship. Siman Yud Zayin. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Okay. Siman Yud Zayin. Atavos bimkom tashlum ma'aser. When can you provide service or goods in lieu of a tzedakah pledge? Okay. In other words, let's say you've pledged $10,000 and you don't have it. Can you work that off? Like, can you wash the dishes at the yeshiva in order to pay off your pledge? Right. Yeah. Right. That's right. Yeah. Siman Yudches Hilchos Nidrei Tzedakah. What are the halachos of pledges? Right. In other words, what is your obligation once you make a pledge? And Hilchos Gova HaTzedakah, the laws of the actual collection of the tzedakah. Perhaps we'll talk about installments and things like that.
I don't see covered in here at all. That would be like our mate, for people, especially Fort Hill, who want to multiple and give out towards
Well, I think we will see. We probably will see Me'eza. We'll see probably Seder Adifus B'Tzedakah, what the hierarchy is, and who is considered to be a charity. Mihu Royally told Tzedakah. Okay. I hope that he'll identify that in this. This is a pretty exhaustive list, so I'm hoping that he'll get to that. So then he's got the second part is tshuvas from a number of different poskim. Rav Yisrael Yaakov Kanievsky, that was the Stipler, Rav Moshe Feinstein, Rav Shlomo Zalman, Rav Yitzchak Yaakov Weiss, Rav Yisrael Yaakov Fisher, Rav Elyashiv, who was alive at the time of this writing, Rav Shmuel Halevi Vazner, Rav Nissim Karelitz, Rav Chaim Kanievsky. So you see, it's got a stellar lineup, right, of tshuvas. Rav Moshe Sternbach and Rav Yitzchak Zilberstein. Baruch Hashem, both are still with us. If I'm not, I think Rav Sternbach is still with us. So yes, yeah, absolutely. So, and then he goes in the Chela Gimel, some contemporary issues. The Inyan Kfiya Ba'arama al Hatzdaka, deceitful tactics in charity fundraising. The Inyan Kabbalah Tzedakah Minashim, accepting tzedakah from women. If you remember when we were learning Hilchos Choshen Mishpat, we learned that sometimes the poskim say that it's problematic to accept donation from a married woman who may be taking assets from her husband's account without his consent. When pressure is brought to bear on a person who doesn't have the ability, or more, when demands are made that he give more than his ability. How do we quantify the obligation of tzedakah? The inyan shekaspe meiser hulaniyim davka. When what do you do when or do we say that the meiser money should be specifically given to the poor, or in contrast, let's say to charitable organizations? The inyan tovas hanami kaspe meiser. When can you benefit from the meiser money? Let's say buying a lottery ticket or something like that. The inyan zman hafrashas meiser ksachim. When do you have to actually tithe your income? Is it as you get the paycheck, or can you do it later? The inyan patur mishmira b'kaspe tzedakah. Is one exempt from, let's say, securing the tzedakah money? Let's say I set aside tzedakah money and it gets stolen. What's my obligation? Begeder day machsoro. What is really quantifies as give the poor what he needs in order to make him whole? What is my obligation? The inyan meiser lekarov, tithing for a relative. The inyan kibel yoser me reish. Well, it could be, or it could also be that maybe you could use the argument that supporting your adult children could be counted as tzedakah when it doesn't count as tzedakah. The inyan kibel yoser me reish zuz. I'm not really sure what this is, but it's based on something in the Shulchan Aruch and Separation on Gimel, where you get more than 200 zuz. Okay. The inyan imani chayav limkar kelev. As far as a poor person accepting tzedakah, at what point of poverty, right, does he qualify? Does he have to sell off certain assets first? The inyan sonei matanos yechya. What about the ideological concept of what it says in Mishlei, that he who despises the dole will live? And so therefore, how far should a person push himself before relenting and accepting tzedakah? The inyan mi nikra ani lekabel tzedakah, who qualifies as an ani. The inyan mosar aniyim la aniyim. What about when there's a surplus? And what do you do with the surplus in tzedakah collection? The inyan umdana b'tzedakah, how you make an estimation as far as how much a person deserves. The inyan ani hamishana midas hatorein. What do you do about an individual or an institution who changes the money from its intended use? So for example, let's say the guy was collecting for his wife's surgery, and then it turns out that he decides he's going to use it for his children's wedding, whatever. So we're already at 6:40, so we're going to have to hold it here. But I wanted to at least spend some time going through the table of contents to see that there are a number of issues involved here, and we'll continue Mirz Hashem tomorrow.